For the record, I'm 100% aware that this is a terrible reason to like shooting photography with the a7s3, but just listen to this thing. Versus the a7 III. And again, a7s3. Why do I like that so much? Yeah, it's definitely a little bit weird. Anyways, today we're talking about the a7s3 and how I set my camera up specifically for photography. Yes, the a7s3 is primarily a video camera, but I think it's an extremely capable photo camera. Big question everybody has is 12 megapixels enough? And my answer to that is, for almost all of us, yes. Higher megapixels can be really nice if you're blowing up your images, which a lot of us aren't really doing anymore. Can also be really nice if you need to crop in significantly and maintain quality. I actually like having that as a little bit of a disadvantage because I think it makes me a little bit more aware of my framing, knowing that I don't have as much flexibility for cropping in post. It makes me a better photographer. This camera has an exceptional EVF. The autofocus is insane, has a really nice burst rate, does well in low light. In short, it's a very, very capable photography camera. And I actually think a lot more people are going to be looking at it as a hybrid shooter, which is photos and video. With the introduction of the FX3 being a primarily video camera, I think it's going to pair really well with having something like an a7S3. Those two cameras together, S3 being a really good, obviously, video camera, pairing well with the color science of the FX3, but a7S3 having the ability to shoot really nice photos as well. I think people are also going to be looking at this as a photo camera because Adobe just dropped a release where you're able to make images, any image, particularly lower megapixel images. When you crop in, it's got some AI working that adds sharpening and adds better detail to that shot. Haven't tried that out yet. If it's really good, I think it's going to attract a lot of people, which is obviously making me think about swapping out my a7 III, which is currently my B camera, for the FX3 and making that a7S3 FX3 combo myself. So I don't know, we'll see what happens there. There's a few settings you have to get right with the a7S3 though to really maximize its benefits as a photo camera, and one really big one about being able to distinguish settings between photo and video. So let's jump into the a7S3. I'll take you through the settings that I'm currently working with, and you can duplicate them and enjoy this camera for photos as well. First thing, I want to make sure the dial up top is set to M for manual. That's also just photo mode. Shutter priority will work, aperture priority will also work, but we're gonna run with M for today. From there, we're gonna go into our menu, and this first one is the most important one if you wanna really maximize your efficiency with hybrid shooting. Briefcase at the bottom, and which I didn't know was a briefcase until somebody on YouTube said it. I just thought it was like a weird looking cassette tape. Anyways, briefcase, we're gonna go to number 3 under Operation Customize. We're gonna drop down to different set for still and movie. When we click on that, we're gonna be met with this pop-up menu, and essentially what this is saying is whatever you have checked on the next menu is gonna be completely separate or independent whether you're in stills or video mode. I understand that might be a little bit confusing, so let's run through it. We're gonna click on OK. I have every single one of these checked. If yours isn't checked, you can just use the center button on your menu wheel and toggle those on and off. The reason I have as many of them checked as possible is because I want to be able to do as many things that the camera will let me do to be independent settings from photo mode versus video mode. Let's walk through what that actually looks like right now. Jumping back into the regular display, I'm still in M, which you can see in the upper left of the screen here. I'm still in manual mode, and let's say for this photography shot, let's say I wanted my, doesn't really matter, I'm not actually gonna do this photo, but let's say I wanted my shutter at 1/60. Let's say I wanted my f-stop to be at f8 and my ISO to be at 5000. Maybe I also want my white balance to be set to auto. And I'm doing photos here, so I definitely don't want to have a picture profile. Let's go ahead and turn that completely off. All right, do me a favor. Remember what we just did. 1/60 on the shutter, f8, ISO 5000, no picture profile, and auto white balance. We're gonna switch over to video mode right now. All right, I'm clearly in video mode, which you can see in the upper left-hand corner now, that little video icon. And for this shot, I'm just gonna leave this stuff alone, but let's have my shutter at 1/60, my aperture at f2.8, ISO, we're gonna bring that to, let's keep it at 160. Picture profile, I'm gonna run my custom picture profile in PP3. If you missed that video, I'll link it up top. You can check that out if you're curious what picture profile I'm running for video. And for white balance, we're gonna lock that off at 5600. So very different settings than I would have for photos. Now take a look at these. We got our shutter locked off at 1/60, aperture's f2.8, ISO's 160, picture profile is 3, and our white balance is 5600. Now we're gonna kick back over into photo mode, and what's gonna happen is the settings that we had last time we were in photo mode, those are still gonna be there. They're not going to just carry over from video mode, which is what used to happen in other Sony cameras, which was pretty annoying because your photo settings, especially like shutter, picture profile, these are things that you're always gonna have be a little bit different than when you're in video, so it saves time if the camera remembers what you were doing with photos versus videos. All right, we're back in manual mode for photos, and I haven't done anything besides turn the dial up top, and if you remembered those settings that we had for photos, they're still there. They haven't carried over from video. Our shutter is still at 1/60, our f-stop is at f8, our ISO is still at 5000, there's no picture profile, and our white balance is still set to auto. Cannot express how important that is when you're trying to do a lot of hybrid shooting throughout the day and keeping these settings completely separate. All right, we're gonna stay in manual mode up here. That's important because when we go into the menu, when we're in photo mode, the menu's a little bit different than we're in video mode. I'm gonna be running fairly quickly through my settings here for photography, but what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna link a video up top that Donna Did It Did, try that 5 times fast, about the entire breakdown of the Sony a7s3 menu system. It's incredibly valuable. And the reason I say that I want you to check that video out is because I'm not gonna walk you through every single one of these items. I'm just gonna show you the ones that I change from default. So if I don't talk about them, it's because I don't change them from default. Very first tab here under image quality, I'm absolutely gonna change these from default. It comes default in JPEG, I shoot in RAW. Difference between the two, if you don't know, RAW is a bigger file type, but you also have a significant amount of post-processing flexibility as opposed to JPEGs. And really with a 12 megapixel camera, the RAW files are not that large, it's not a huge deal. So I shoot in RAW, all these other JPEG settings I don't mess with because I don't shoot in JPEG. RAW file type I have as uncompressed. I've never seen a good argument as to what the difference is here, so I just leave it as uncompressed. Another thing that I change is I go under lens compensation, I turn all of these off for photo mode. It's a very easy thing to do in post-processing, and I think the camera doesn't do nearly as good of a job as something like Lightroom. Continuing through, we're gonna go to number 6 here, shutter and silent. I don't shoot in silent mode too often. I'm in some situations where I do, and I have a custom button set to route me to my silent mode. I'll show you my function menu and my custom buttons in just a second. That's where that's gonna be. But what I do change, shutter type, I make sure that is mechanical. Electronic front curtain shutter, I turn that off. And that is all that I change in here. And let's keep rolling. So shooting display, grid line display, I turn that on. And then my type of grids that I use, I like the diagonal plus the square grid. Pretty much a good preference option there for you. So choose whatever you like, I like those options. Next piece here, these are really important, but I have almost all of them, at least the ones that I use in my function menu or my custom buttons. Again, we'll talk about that in just a second. But one thing that I do change in here is the dynamic range optimizer. I actually keep this on for photos. I don't have it on for video ever, but it can be helpful in photo mode, especially if you're shooting RAW. And creative look, just make sure that's set to standard. We can do all of our post-processing creativity. It's a little bit more flexible in Lightroom. All right, purple menu, our focus. Very, very, very important stuff, but I have those again routed in my function menu. I leave my playback completely alone. I do change one thing under these network options. There are a few things that I'll do with controlling with smartphone if I need to like release the shutter with my phone. Not gonna get too deep into that today. Can be helpful at times, but what I do change, I turn my airplane mode on. And unless you're using Bluetooth or Wi-Fi on the camera to transfer files or connect to your smartphone, you really don't need to have your airplane mode turned off. It's gonna drain the battery pretty quickly, and you can tell that your airplane mode is on. Let me go back to that for a second. You can tell that your airplane mode is on because there's a little icon that pops up on your menu that looks like an airplane. And it's right there. Custom buttons and my function menu. So to find that, it's under the briefcase, under Operation Customize. You have your custom key settings. Little icon there stands for photo mode. This is video mode. You can do it for playback too, though I don't mess with that. So we're gonna talk through the photo ones and we'll come back to function menu settings in just a second. All right, this is exactly how I have my camera set up for my custom buttons for photos. First thing, my wheel, I have that set to ISO. Button number 2, which is the AEL button on the upper right of the camera, that's gonna be my auto white balance lock toggle. AF on, I do use back button focusing. I don't do the half press, so some controversy there probably on the way. Let me know in the comments if you hate that or love it. White balance on number 4, which is my custom button 1. My finder or monitor selection, I do like the EVF a lot on the A7S III for photography, so I like toggling between the EVF versus the monitor with number 5 there, custom button 3, and then drive mode for custom button 4 if I want to switch between single shooting or any type of continuous. Tab 2, the joystick press in, I have that set to focus area. Zebra display select, I just turn zebras on and off with the center button on the wheel. I leave these 3 and 4, so tapping your wheel right or left, I leave those as not set because again, I have my ISO set to the wheel. And if you have these set, sometimes when you're scrolling your ISO, you can push down and it can go to a crazy place. So I leave those as not set. Pressing down though, I have that set to picture profile. I've had that on all my Sony cameras, just a quick access to picture profile. Let's be honest with you, for photos, you probably don't need anything there. So let's go ahead and turn that completely off and go not set. I don't need picture profile for photos. Third tab, top, that's the movie button. I have that not set at all. I don't want to start recording when I'm in photo mode for any reason whatsoever, so I just take out any confusion there. And then my AF MF selector toggle, if my lens doesn't have the ability to switch between autofocus and manual focus, which my Zeiss Batis does not, I can just tap that to switch over to manual focus quickly when I'm in auto mode. Last thing, if your lens does have a custom button on the lens, you can use a eye autofocus, which I like here a lot. Nice and natural place there for photography, so just triggering the camera to make sure it's prioritizing eye, that's a nice thing to have. All right, function menu settings. Now, the nice thing here is that you can see the video down below versus the photo up top, and you can make them completely separate. Similar to my custom buttons, if I don't have a purpose to set something, I'll just set it as not set to reduce confusion. And what that looks like, this is my actual live function menu. On the left, you see those blank spaces. It's because they're not set. All right, continuing through here. So besides those being not set, here's the other things that I change. I add my peaking display, and if you don't know how to add things here, if you just click on it, you can cycle through the menu and you can find what you want to attach to it. Peaking display when I'm in manual focus mode. My autofocus track sensitivity, very important to have set up and ready to go for photo mode, though I almost always have that as fast as possible for photos. Change it a lot for video. Interval shooting, this is just a quick way to access if I want to do any types of time lapses, gets me right in there. Dynamic range optimizer, like I said, I typically always have this on for photo mode, but if it happens to be doing something crazy, I'll want a quick toggle to turn that off. My focus mode on the far right. Zebra levels. For the record, I do want to do a video in the near future about how to actually use zebras for exposure. I've noticed in the comments in some of my past videos that there's a little bit of confusion there, so that one's on the way. Face or eye autofocus priority. This is important. Sometimes the camera will grab a crazy subject. It's not a face, and sometimes you need to be able to turn that on and off quickly. Aspect ratio. This is essentially choosing between 3x2, 4x5, 1x1, or 16x9, and I usually never use this, but I started shooting YouTube thumbnails a lot with this camera, so sometimes it can help out with your framing to be able to choose your aspect ratio. Where my media wants to go, and then there's my quick toggle for choosing silent mode on or off. So there you have it. That's exactly how I set my A7S III up for photography. If this video has helped you out at all, go ahead and give it a tap on the thumbs up down below. It helps out the channel a lot, and I greatly appreciate it. I'm also realizing that so many of my videos on this channel have been about the A7S III. And for good reason. It's a phenomenal camera and there's just so much to cover, but I want to expand my horizons a little bit. Maybe shooting some things, always staying within the creative space, of course. Maybe shooting like how to expose using zebras, what frame rates I shoot in and why, things like that. But I could use your help. I'm gonna put a form link down below. Just check that out and vote on what you think my next video should be. Majority wins, and I'm probably gonna close that link out only a couple days after posting this video because I wanna make sure that I have the proper time to plan that video and that it meets my quality standard. But hey, that's gonna do it for me. My name is Sean DeWispelaire, and this channel is all about the skills behind the art of creativity. Photography, videography, gear, reviews, tutorials, and me being full-time in the fitness industry, it's always gonna have just a little bit of a fitness feel to it. So if that's something that you're into, hit the subscribe button down below so that you can be a part of all the future videos, and I'll look forward to seeing all of you in the next one. Take care. See ya.